Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the July Data and Performance Management meeting. Thank you for joining. If you haven't already, please enter your name or your agency name into the chat box so we know who is participating. Also, if possible, we do try to have conversation and discussion during this meeting. So if you can, please be prepared to unmute yourself to contribute, or you can also type any feedback or questions you have into the chat so that we can get your feedback that way. So today we are going to continue our conversation around the agency racial inequity dashboard, and then we're going to talk about the emergency shelter project performance reports. I think we'll end a little bit early, but it will depend largely on the feedback from the group. So last month we started talking about the racial inequity dashboards, and the group felt that it would be helpful to have both a COC dashboard, so that would show how our COC is performing as a whole, and then also racial inequity dashboards for each agency. And that is what we are going to be discussing today. So the agency racial inequity dashboard would be available in Clarity for your agency to run as needed, so that you can look at this data whenever you would like, and you can use it for, research purposes or education, or proposals, grant proposals, or whatever the case may be. So right now, the agency racial inequity dashboard has three main sections. We are looking at active clients. We're also looking at subpopulations and then performance measures. And so let me go first into active clients. So this section allows you to see how many clients are in HMIS being served at your agency during whatever the reporting period may be. And then it allows you to compare that data to the OC census. And last time we also talked a bit about if we should combine race and ethnicity into one field, or if we should look at them separately. And so in other slides, which I'll show you in a little bit, we do combine them, but when we're looking at active clients and comparing that data to the OC census, we do have to keep race and ethnicity separate because that's the way the census looks at it. So we have to look at it the same way in order to make a good comparison of the data. So with that said, these 6 looks, so the race options for American Indian, Alaska Native, Asian, Black, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, multiracial, or white. These percentages should add up to close to 100%, since it is all of these clients are being collected in one field, but then the Hispanic Latino data will not, because it's being collected in a different field. And so when you're looking at this dashboard, ideally, if everything were equitable across race and ethnicity, the percentage of clients in HMIS would match the percentage of people in the OC population. And you'll see for some of these, this isn't the case. So Asian clients are underrepresented in the homeless population compared to the Orange County population. Black, African American, or African clients are overrepresented. White clients are a little bit overrepresented, as well as Hispanic clients. So again, this is something that your agency, you'll be able to pull specifically for your agency. So you'll be able to see how you're performing on this. Right now, we don't have the option to, or at least the dashboard doesn't have the option to pull by project or project type. We could do that, but I was looking at the data and it seemed like it was too small of a population, because there can be certain circumstances that either allow or deny clients from your project. It can just depend on the openings that you have and the eligibility requirements you have for that project. So I thought agency, looking at it for your whole agency, would give it a little bit better overview of what you're doing as a whole. But we could do it by project or project type. I just don't think it's going to be as helpful. So I'll pause for a minute and let people look at this and think about this, and then let me know if you have any feedback or questions about this first part.
I dig it.
Thanks, buddy. Does anyone have questions about, I guess, what we're looking at here, or what we're trying to achieve, or does it make sense?
Just to clarify, this would be presented such that Hispanic is not a subset of any of these others. Like, you wouldn't find these same individuals duplicated elsewhere.
So for this one specifically, it is possible for a client to show up under Black and Hispanic, or white and Hispanic. At other parts in the dashboard, the client's only being counted once. But this one, we had to separate race and ethnicity because we're comparing to the OC census, and that's how they do it.
Gotcha. Thanks for clarifying.
Sure. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. If anything comes up, we can definitely come back, so don't be shy, but I'm going to move on to the next section. So next up, we are looking at different subpopulations. So we have chronically homeless, youth, seniors, veterans, as well as household type data. And so on these charts, a client is only being counted once. So you have the different races here, and Hispanic is also included here. And the way that this is being determined is if a client is identifying as Hispanic, that's where they're being counted. If they don't identify as Hispanic, then they are counted under the other race, whatever race option that they selected. And that guidance came from C4 Innovations, which is a group that our COC has been working with to review racial inequity data. And so these charts will allow you to see, again, discrepancies for in different subpopulations. So for example, white clients account for a larger percentage of the chronically homeless population compared to the non-chronically homeless population, while Hispanic clients are less of the chronically homeless population than the non-chronically homeless. And as you go through these different populations, you can start to see, I guess, patterns, and to help you kind of make sense of your data. So white clients are more likely to be chronically homeless, or are a larger part of that population. They're also a larger part of the senior and veteran population, whereas Hispanic clients are more of the youth population. So you can kind of look at your data that way and learn a little bit more about who you're serving. And so this, we can add other populations if you are thinking of one that I missed. But I'll give everyone a minute to think about this one. We did get a question: how will the COC use the race and ethnicity data? So right now, this dashboard is for your use. It's educational purposes and analysis purposes for your own agency. Right now, we don't have a plan in place to do anything with this data other than provide you with education. The COC dashboard that we'll be doing it won't highlight any agencies, it'll be for Orange County as a whole. And that we do need to include in our COC application to HUD to show that we look at this data and are kind of analyzing this data on a normal basis. So right now the dashboard's for your own use. But I'll take another pause and see if there's any questions or comments or other feedback on the subpopulation data. All right, I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to go on to performance measures. So this slide lists all of the performance measures that we are currently looking at as a COC, just in general, like on our PPRs. The measures that are in red are the measures that right now have been added to the agency racial inequity dashboard. So for each of the measures in red, you'll be able to see by race what the performance looks like. So we have days to permanent housing placement, days between coordinated match and acceptance, referrals, coordinated entry referrals denied by the housing provider, successful exits to permanent housing stabilization, and successful coordinated entry referrals. We can add other measures to this dashboard if anyone has strong feelings about it. But the reason that I focused on these is because these are the ones that I felt like you could come to the most conclusions about the data if you're looking at it by race, and are probably the measures that your agency has the most control over in terms of performance. I know maybe successful exits and stabilization might not be entirely in your control, but it would, I think, at least be good to know how the clients are performing on these measures, since the goal of the project is to house clients. So this is a sample of what the measures look like. Each measure is a separate chart. And again, you'll be able to see for each race or ethnicity how the clients are performing. So you can see Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders have less successful referrals from coordinated entry, and they are taking longer to be placed in permanent housing units. So you can go through this dashboard and you'll be able to make those kind of conclusions about your data to help you understand where to go moving forward. Also, in this exits from agency look, you can see Hispanic clients are more likely to exit to permanent housing or temporary situations, while Asian clients are more likely to exit to permanent housing, and white clients are more likely to exit to institutional settings. So yes, these are the measures that will be on the dashboard, as well as what were the other two? It was denials by housing provider and days between match and their acceptance into the project. So is there any other measures that anyone feels would be beneficial to include on this dashboard, or any feedback on this dashboard from the group? And does anybody have any strong feelings about being able to run any of this data by project or project type? Everyone's chilling. All right, I'm not seeing anything in the chat either. So unless anybody has any feedback on how we can improve this, we will release this dashboard at the next user meeting. And then we will work on the COC dashboard, and then that will be shared at a future data meeting for the group's feedback. Any final thoughts on this dashboard? Anything that would make it more useful for you or your team? All right, cool. All right, I'm going to go into the emergency shelter project performance reports. As usual, we published both project scores as well as the goals and outcomes report for emergency projects as a whole. If you haven't already, check out the project scores report so you can see how your emergency shelter projects are doing. And then the goals and outcomes report shows the performance overall for all emergency shelters in our HMIS system. So our first measure is clients entering from homeless situations. So this has remained fairly consistent over the past couple of years. Goal 2 is looking at the length of stay of clients in emergency shelter projects. There's been a little bit of fluctuation for this measure, but we're starting back down on the downtrend. And this has been because of COVID and projects wanting to keep clients in their sheltered situations rather than exiting them out to the streets or other situations that maybe aren't good for clients, especially during COVID. Goal 5, we are looking at unit utilization of emergency shelter projects. This has been low over the past couple of years, also because of COVID. And you'll see when we get into the details of goal 5, there's a big discrepancy between the household types. Households with children have a much higher utilization than households without children, and that's likely due to clients not wanting to be in like a shared housing situation with another client or be in close proximity to another client because of COVID. Goal 6 is looking at adults that increase their income while they remained enrolled in the project. There are not many clients that are being counted in this measure because emergency shelter projects usually don't serve clients for longer than a year. And this measure is looking at clients that were in the project for at least a year and were still active in the project at the end of the reporting period. Since we have been meeting this measure consistently for the past couple of years, even during the pandemic, I would recommend that we increase this threshold to 15%. I'll give you all a chance to think about that. I'll do a little survey at the end of this page, so you can think about that, increasing this from 10% to 15%. Goal 7 is similar data, but it's looking at adults that increased their income by the time they exited. Our performance on this measure has remained consistent, but we're still a little bit under our threshold for this one. Goal 8, we are looking at exits to permanent housing situations. Our threshold is 30%, and again, we're a little bit under that threshold, although we've been doing a little bit better over time. And then goal 10, we're looking at clients that exited to permanent housing situations and then later returned to the HMIS system in a homeless project. And this one, we also have been consistently meeting the threshold over the past couple of years. The threshold is less than or equal to 15%. And so for this threshold, I would recommend that we change it to less than or equal to 10%, which the project type is still meeting over the past 2 years, even during the pandemic. So I'm going to do a quick poll to let you all vote on these two. Okay, you should be able to see the poll now. And while we're waiting, also, if you have any questions or comments so far about the emergency shelter PPR, we can take those now. All right, I'll give it a couple more seconds. All right, most of you participated, and so almost everyone agreed with increasing or changing the thresholds for both measures. So we will update that for the next report, and we'll also include it on the project performance overview document. Thank you guys for your feedback. So I will keep going. So now that we've kind of looked at the high level overview, we will get into the specific measures a little bit more. So goal 1, again, is looking at clients entering from homeless situations. You can see it's fairly consistent across the other subpopulations, except for households with only children, that there's a low percentage of entries from homelessness. This is because the emergency shelters that serve households with only children are RIE funded, meaning runaway homeless youth. And those clients, because of that funding, don't have to enter from a homeless situation. A lot of them are coming from friends or families, which is why the percentage of non-homeless entries is so large. But that's why that number is lower, because that funding allows them to take clients from not homeless situations. And as I mentioned, almost half of the non-homeless entries are coming from family or friends, followed by institutional settings. All right, goal 2 is looking at the length of time that clients are staying in emergency shelter projects. Again, most of the populations are fairly close, except for households with only children. And again, it's because of that special population. The good news is that 82% of the enrollments that were included in this measure are meeting the current threshold. So that is good news. We're on the right track. Goal 5 is looking at utilization of emergency shelter beds. So, I mixed them around, or I think this is mixed around. It should be households with children, I think is 73%, and without children is 25%. So we'll check that and confirm. But there's a big discrepancy between the two household types, and is due to COVID and clients not wanting to stay in close proximity to other clients. And you can see here, so this is the projects that were included in this measure, and the percentage of them that were under 65%, which is low utilization, 65 to 105%, which is normal utilization, and over 105%, which is high utilization. And a lot of the projects do have low utilization in the past year. Goal 6 is adults that increase their income while enrolled in the project. And this is consistent across the different populations. 38% of clients that remained enrolled for at least a year had no income. So the income at entry was no, and then either they didn't do an annual assessment update or they did and it was still no income. The second largest population was maintained income. So I would recommend emergency shelter projects to look at those annual assessments and make sure that you are completing that annual assessment and updating the income, because clients with no income and maintained income can both be because the annual assessment income hasn't been updated properly. So just a reminder to complete those annual assessments to capture that correct income. And goal 7, adults that increase their income at exit. You can see households with children had a larger percentage of adults that had increased income. And I think we talked about that with transitional housing, and the agencies thought it was because of an income tax credit for children, I think it was. I don't know if anybody can expand on that a little bit, but that was, from what I remember, that was the reason why. Again, the clients with no income was a large percentage. Almost half of the clients that exited had no income, followed by clients that maintained income. And I suspect that this is because many clients are disappearing or exiting back to homelessness, and either haven't had a change or just haven't reported it to the case manager. Goal 8 is looking at permanent housing exits from emergency shelter projects. Households with only children had a higher percentage of exits to permanent housing. Again, because of that population that they're serving, a lot of these clients are returning to their families. So that's why that percentage is higher. And then households with children also has a higher percentage of exits to permanent housing situations. Of those that are not exiting to permanent housing, 54% are exiting to homeless situations, and then another significant proportion are exiting to missing. And a lot of that is likely due to clients disappearing and not completing an exit interview with their case manager. which is also likely impacting the income measure. Goal 10 is looking at clients that exited emergency shelter projects to permanent housing and then later returned to the homeless system. So the households without children is a little bit higher than some of the other populations, likely because these clients are more likely to be chronically homeless. That's probably why their percentage is a little bit higher. And so in this donut, you can see the project type that these clients are returning to. 30% are returning to street outreach, and 49% are returning to another emergency shelter. So that does make sense with the flow of our system, especially with coordinated entry, those are the project types these clients would return to. And 67% of these clients are returning to another project within 6 months after they exited to permanent housing. So if clients can remain in their housing for more than 6 months, they're much less likely to return. And that was all I have on the emergency shelter PPR. Did anyone have any questions or comments about this data? Or any other questions about the racial inequity dashboard? All right, I'm not seeing anything come in, so it's a quick meeting today. If you haven't already, please enter your agency name into the chat box so we know who is attending. Our next meeting is scheduled for August 11th at 1:30, and we will send out the agenda. We will share it at the user meeting and then send it out when we release the next project performance report. And that next project performance report will be, hold on, street outreach. So thank you all so much for attending. The racial inequity dashboard will be published and shared at the next user meeting at the beginning of August. And meeting minutes and recording will go out next week. And have a great day, everyone. Thanks for attending.